How to make people agree with you. I know it's something we all want to do. We all have an opinion, we all have a perspective, and we all see lots of people in this world who don't agree with us. And you decided to give this a watch because you really are wondering, like, how do you do it? How do you make people agree with you? Because if you can figure that one out, it's gonna be a superpower. Now, let me just warn you guys that the answer to this question and the advice I'm going to give you is gonna be like one of those monkey paws, where the thing you wished for by the end of the story is gonna make you wish that you didn't wish for it. And to be quite honest with you guys, you are probably better off clicking away from this and watching some sort of video of a person getting shot in the nuts with a Nerf gun.
Stories told with Morgan Gold. With Morgan Gold, it's time for Stories Told.
Okay, you've officially been warned. You're still here. And so I guess I will get into it. And so yes, here it is. How to make people agree with you. Now, step one is you don't try to make people agree with you, because the more you try to make people agree with you, the more they're actually not going to agree with you.
It's a trap!
The more they're going to dig in and say, no, you're wrong, I'm right. And you are going to effectively entrench them into a place where they're guaranteed not to agree with you on that point. And in fact, you might make them actually disagree with you on even more things when all is said and done.
Backfired spectacularly.
For a great long while, I've tried really hard to share my perspectives and share my beliefs and share the things that I think with other people, in the hopes that maybe this will encourage other folks to think and see the world the way I see it. And I will just tell you now, at this point, I have come to the conclusion that that is an absolutely futile activity, and there's really no point in ever doing it. And even though I know this information, and even though I know that this is the truth, I still fall into the trap of trying to make people agree with me, right internet wrongs that I see out there. And it is so pointless and is so stupid. Like here's an example of just me being stupid. You know, the other day, somebody on Facebook, and not really like a close family member or friend, but just a loose acquaintance, they made this comment during like a really cold period of time of like, hey, how's that global warming thing working out for you? And I saw this post and was like, grinds my gears. I am definitely a person who believes that climate change is an existential crisis and it really needs to be addressed, and we really need to actively as humanity take action. But I know that that is not the prevailing opinion. But I saw this post from this person, and I just was like, all right, whatever. And I decided to share a link in the comments to her post, basically saying that yes, 2023 is the warmest year on record in human history. Like, that is a fact. And so I shared an article from Scientific American, basically communicating and conveying this idea. The article goes into details also about sort of the long-term warming trend and the fact that we're almost 1.5 degrees Celsius higher on an average than pre-industrial period. Look, objectively speaking, the Earth is getting hotter. And the responses I got in the comments were just so disappointing, and just, I don't know, made me want to crawl into a hole, or at least just put my head under a blanket or start playing video games or something. And I was looking at all of the responses, and it really had me saying, well, what did I expect? I knew this person had kind of a conservative viewpoint on the world. I knew this person was making the snarky comment to begin with around climate change because they don't believe it's a thing. Me sharing something that I see as objective facts is not going to change their opinion one bit. And there really is no point to it. Like, it was a stupid waste of time and energy on my part, wasted time on other people's parts. I should have just ignored the post and just kept on doom scrolling, because that's what we do in this day and age. Because if I haven't learned anything over, say, the last decade or so, arguing politics with people on the internet is a lot like trying to teach a dog to read. In the end, you're both frustrated, embarrassed, and nobody's going to be voting any differently when we come to November. And so trying to resort to facts and what you see as rational arguments and what you see as key data points isn't going to change the worldview of anyone else out there. Science will even tell us that people don't like to change their mind. Changing someone's mind is complicated for a variety of psychological factors, but arguably the biggest factor out there is the factor of identity, particularly when it comes to like political beliefs. So much of all of our collective identities these days are wrapped up in our political beliefs. That is not meant to be a slight. That is not meant to be a judgment. That is just the case of what it is. If you go back over the last few hundred years, you know, so much of it was rooted in like the identity of your family or of your community or even of your country. But as things grow bigger and as monocultures break down and as we all kind of isolate out into these various pockets of like our own, you know, separate spaces and own separate echo chambers, as that shift happens, the identity becomes much stronger and much more rooted in the ideological things. The breakdown of third places leading to increased senses of isolation and loneliness. And the reality is social media and going online and stating your beliefs and the people that you're connecting with on social media are ultimately more and more becoming kind of your community members. And so while, say, 150 years ago, the third place might have been the general store, and you're talking to folks who you run into at the general store, you're not talking to anybody that you run into at the gas station anymore. And in fact, you're more likely to ignore people in person more than ever, but you're talking to so many people online and listening to so many opinions online and even actually crafting these parasocial communities with content creators online. Like all of these things are supplanting the third place. Back in the day, I mean, look, if you go back thousands of years, tribes and clans were how people identified. And then, you know, kind of nation states and nations and nationalities took rise. Religion has historically been one of those ways that people identify and connect themselves. But more and more, politics and your beliefs and what you think are your identity.
Don't you think that's not a good thing to do?
And so when some rando on the internet throws out facts and beliefs that challenge your identity, you're going to immediately dig in and say,
No, you're wrong. And here, let me tell you all the reasons why.
And that person's only going to dig in more and say,
No, you're wrong, and let me tell you all the reasons why.
And it just goes back and forth where you have deeper and deeper entrenchment. And all of this got me thinking, like, if we're all seeing that we're not winning political arguments online and we're not getting people to agree with us when we argue our point online, like, why are we even bothering? And I'm realizing more and more, it's not about convincing other people that your point of view is right. It's more like a pep rally for the people who share the beliefs that you have. You know, we're all getting into the gymnasium and saying, yay, let's go Bayside Tigers. Yeah.
We're the Bayside Tigers and we're on the prowl.
Trashing the other high school or stealing their mascot, and you're getting your fellow tribe members kind of connected and riled up with you. And so it's just not the way to make people agree with you. Which, coming back to the point of this whole video, it is actually to show you guys how to make people agree with you. And so I do want to get into that a little bit.
Feels like you told me that nearly a year ago now.
Yeah, we're kind of burning daylight here, eh?
The more people dig into arguing a point, oftentimes it shows that they know less about that specific issue, and they're trying to use their kind of adamant argument as a way to show their belief in an idea that they might not have. I don't know if it's like, you know, an example of the Dunning-Kruger effect or something else.
Standing tall on the peaks of our pride, blinded by what we know inside. In the valley of learning, where truth collides, it's the Dunning-Kruger ride.
The less somebody knows about something, the harder they're going to argue. And the more somebody knows about something, usually the answer they're going to have to any question is it all depends. The more knowledgeable somebody is about a topic or an issue, the more they're going to say that, you know, it all sort of depends on this scenario or that scenario. And they speak in a lot fewer absolutes. As you become an expert in things, you start to realize there are a lot fewer blacks and whites in this world, and just a whole mess and variety of shades of gray. You know, I can apply this to a whole bunch of things. Like, I'll actually go to a world that has got nothing to do with politics and just talk about raising poultry, like, you know, like ducks, geese, chickens, that sort of thing, which you guys know about me, is something I do and I've been doing for a little while now. And when I first got started raising poultry, there were certain things where I became like very dogmatic because I was taught like, oh, this is the way to do it versus that way to do it. But as the years have gone by and I've gained more experience, I'm realizing that the answer is often it depends. Like here's an example. I live in Vermont. I keep poultry outdoors in the winter. I generally don't use heat for adult birds because I don't think it's good for them. There's like some risks involved in terms of fire safety. There's some risks involved in terms of bird health that like leads me to believe that it's not good to give birds heat. But that said, over the last, 6 years, I've had a couple of examples where I've had a bird get wet and I need to give her heat or else she would have frozen and died. And so I realize now, and I kind of look back on things that I've said or done, say 5 years ago and realize that, that was sort of the folly of, again, the Dunning-Kruger effect, where I'm just kind of getting into something and I'm learning as much as I can. And learning, you become very devout to that versus the more experience and more I've been doing it, the less tightly I hold on to those early teachings, and the more I see all of the nuances and a variety of experiences that you can have after raising hundreds of birds over a few years, and realize that the answer to most questions becomes it depends. And so if you're trying to get somebody to agree with you, and if you're trying to get somebody to see your point of view in the world, just kind of keep that in mind and recognize that the tighter somebody is holding on to something, they probably feel more insecure about it. And the more you can create space for them to kind of explore those feelings of insecurity and not feel like they've gone to battle, the more effective you're going to be with them. And for the folks out there who are going to declare that facts don't care about your feelings and really point to that as a way to sort of justify their worldview or whatever they've got going, you got to recognize that at this stage of the game, people are finding facts and takes on things to support any belief. And it sucks. But we are definitely moving into, or probably already long since been in, this post-fact world. And when I think about the impact of artificial intelligence and deep fakes and what that's going to be doing for misinformation over the next 12 months, I fully realize that people are going to see things and hear things that are going to anchor their beliefs so heavily that there's no way that ship is going to become unmoored. Is that even a word? Alexa, what does unmoored mean?
The term unmoored is not widely used and may be an informal or colloquial expression. It may be intended to mean moving in the opposite direction or going backward.
No, let's say, Alexa, I'm just looking at the dictionary here, and that is the right way to use that word. Not or no longer attached to a mooring, an unmoored barge. Insecure, confused, or like, I used it exactly right, Alexa. It bothers me when you gaslight me like that. Robots, what are you gonna do? Okay, now with all of that said, here comes the monkey paw part of the how to make people agree with you advice. It really comes down to these 4 things. And number 1, and arguably most important, is you gotta take the time to understand their perspective. Understand why somebody believes something and why somebody sees the world that they see it. Like, really take the time to do that. You need to do that. It might feel frustrating. It might feel pointless. It might feel like you're giving airtime to something that is offensive in your worldview. But quite honestly, if you genuinely want to get somebody to agree with you, you have to invest the time, energy, and just mental capital into getting to understand and know their perspective. This by no means means you have to agree with them. This does not mean that you have to buy into their beliefs, but to take the time and have the empathy to understand where they're coming from is going to make such a world of difference in any conversation that you have with the person on that topic. You might think they're a snowflake libtard, or you might think they're a raging racist. Like, that might still be how you feel, but understand how they got that way, understand why, and don't do it in a patronizing way, but actually do it in a way with empathy, do it in a way without judgment, and do it in a way where you can actually genuinely try to understand where they're coming from. It's going to make all the difference in the world with how you connect and communicate with those folks. And so if you want to make people agree with you, start there. Really start by understanding where they're coming from.
You never really understand a person until you consider things from his point of view.
Second, really try to help them understand your why. Why do you believe the things that you do? What is that rooted in? Is it just simply a part of your tribal identity and something that you personally are clinging to? Or are there personal experiences or things that you've lived in this world or that you've done or that folks close to you have seen or done that really has shaped your perspective and why you feel the way you feel on a specific topic or issue? And yeah, you can probably throw out all sorts of facts and figures, but those facts and figures are not going to be nearly as powerful as you sharing your personal experience, as you showing them your perspective. So like much in that first part where you're trying to hear their perspective, the more that they can understand your why by getting a sense of your perspective and where you're coming from, it's going to be so much more powerful. And I do not think for one moment that the internet is a great place to communicate or convey those types of things, and particularly do it in a way with an open heart. But the more you can do it, the more powerful that's going to be. And the reason why I say kind of sharing your story is such a powerful move and such an important step in trying to help people see the world the way you see it is it's because what you're doing in sharing your story is you're creating an experience for the other person. You're giving them a way to see the world that you've seen it. You know, the French mathematician Blaise Pascal has this great quote of, "People are generally better persuaded by the reasons which they have themselves discovered than by those which have come into the mind of others." Really meaning that it's a person's personal experience that is going to very much change their mind or anchor their mind to a belief or point of view versus just like hearing somebody say something. And at the same time, you got to recognize that because of somebody's personal experience, they might never have the opportunity to see the world the way you see it. So for example, I am never, ever going to know what it's like to be a black person living in America. I just will never have that perspective. It's not an experience that I can personally have. But hearing stories of friends and folks that I really care about tell me about their perspective as a black person in America, that has absolutely shifted my own personal perspective. And so when you share your perspective with other people, then you're actually helping them create their own experience of discovery. And that is actually going to be way more powerful in shifting their thinking than just spouting out some facts and figures. You know, I'm not trying to say this in a way to say that like somebody who's experiencing racism or homophobia or transphobia or anything really awful really needs to be the one putting in the emotional labor to help other people understand. That's not quite what I'm saying. But what I am trying to say is that by sharing your story and sharing your perspective and doing it in a way where you can actually help create an experience for another person, you're way more likely to get somebody to agree with you. That's what I'm trying to say with it all. The third thing you can do to make people agree with you is to really work hard to find common ground. And I know that that can be so hard. Like when I hear climate change deniers, I actually get so irate and I get so frustrated, and it really does make me want to say, well, wait a minute now. Like, why am I going to give this, silly non-science-based perspective any airtime whatsoever? Why am I going to even give it a shred of credibility? It is angering. But if I'm really trying to change a person's perspective, trying to understand where their distrust of science comes from, trying to understand why they think like climate change initiatives are all about control or trying to get them to eat bugs, like what's that rooted in? Where's that fear actually coming from? As I've done that, and I've actually talked to a number of people who I vehemently disagree with on that very topic, what I've seen is there are valid points. Look, let's go to electric vehicles. I own an electric vehicle. I believe that actually we should really be working very hard to get off of fossil fuels and switch to renewable energy sources. And if we think about our transportation needs, moving more towards electric transportation probably makes more and more sense. That's something I believe. But does that mean that like electric cars are perfect? They're definitely not. Does that mean our electrical grid is in a place right now where it could sustain an entire switch over of the nation over to electric vehicles? It's definitely not. Does that mean that I think like the way lithium is mined to create batteries is ideal? No, like there's all of these flaws and there's all of these imperfections. And recognizing and acknowledging that I think is important, but using that as an opportunity to find common ground, I don't know. I think it's key. So, the Dalai Lama once said, When we talk to others in a language they understand, that goes to their head. When we talk to them in their language, that goes to their heart. The more you can work to meet folks where they are, the more you can say, well, hey, look, these are the things we might disagree on and we might never agree on, but at least we can agree on this, this, and this. The more likely you're going to actually ultimately be to move them in a direction where they ultimately want to go. The truth of the matter is, and this gets to kind of the fourth point around how to make people agree with you, sometimes they're not going to agree with you. And sometimes that first step of acknowledging that is going to be the way that you find the place of common ground. And sometimes maybe you need to be the one to stop and listen and hear what other folks are saying and really try to understand somebody's perspective and really be open to having your own perspective shift. I think for a long time, I looked past this one in a very, very big way. And it's only been recently that I've started to open myself up to this idea that, maybe I'm wrong about this. And actually really trying to approach a lot of things in life by basically saying, hey, what if I'm wrong about this? And asking that question, hey, maybe I'm wrong. And essentially second guessing my own personal beliefs. What I've found is that has helped me see the world a little bit differently. I recognize that sometimes complete agreement may not actually be possible. And accepting that fact is key. And accepting that maybe your perspective needs to shift too is really important. And I would love it, and this is actually probably part of why I wanted to sit down and record this video. I would love to see it become more of an acceptable thing within our society for people to change their minds, for people's perspectives to shift, to create this space and the allowance for that evolution of worldviews to happen. Because I feel like at this point, because things are so polarized and things are so, moved to such a tribal level, that I am concerned that means that people have even less wiggle room now than they ever have to shift their perspective because of, the collective digital footprints we all keep and maintain. That makes it harder to shift because we're on the record with saying something specific. But I think the more that we as a society can create grace and the ability for that perspective to shift, I think the better off we're going to be. And I think that's going to be something that actually helps improve the discourse. To sort of paraphrase Tolstoy for a moment, people often think about changing the world, but they rarely think about changing themselves. If you want to make people agree with you, maybe you need to be the one to change. Which, coming back to my comments at the beginning of this video, that right there might be the actual monkey paw. So that's just some things to think about. Let me know if you think I got this one wrong, or if I've got it right, or if you have some suggestions for me. I really am open, and I really am curious, and look forward to listening. Thanks, everybody.
Stories told with Morgan Gold. With Morgan Gold, it's time for Stories Told.